everybody, and welcome to me reading you another Alex Rider books. This book is book 5, chapter 17, The Church of Forgotten Saints. The search had already begun. Hundreds of men and women were working their way across London, with hundreds more acting as backup on the telephone, on computers, searching and cross-referencing, trawling through the records. Government scientists had confirmed Dr. Stevenson's prediction that terahertz dishes would have to be at least 100 meters above the ground to be effective, and that did indeed make it easier. The search of the city's basements, cellars and twisting alleys would have been impossible even for the country's entire police force and army. But they were looking for something that had to be high up and in plain view. The clock was ticking, but it could be done. Every satellite dish in London was noted, photographed, authenticated, and then eliminated from the search. Whenever possible, the original planning applications were found and checked against the actual dish itself. Telecommunications experts had been called in, and wherever there was any doubt, they were taken up to the relevant floor to see them for themselves. If people were puzzled by the sudden buzz of activity in apartment blocks and offices, nobody said anything. The few journalists who started to ask questions were quietly pulled aside and threatened with such ferocity that they soon decided there were other less dangerous stories to pursue. Word went round that there was a crackdown television license, and every hour across the city more technicians poked and probed, examining the dishes, making sure that they had to be right there. And just after 10 o'clock on Thursday morning, 6 hours before SCORPIA's deadline, they found them. There was a block of flats on the edge of Notting Hill Gate with amazing views over the whole of West London. It was one of the tallest blocks in the city, famous for both its height and its ugliness. It had been designed in the 60s by an architect who must have been relieved he would never have to live in it. The roof contained a number of brick structures, the cables for the lifts, air conditioning units, emergency generators. It was on the side of one of these that the inspectors found 3 brand new satellite dishes facing north, south, and east. Nobody knew what they were for. Nobody had any record of their being placed there. Within minutes, there were a dozen technicians on the roof, and more circling in helicopters. The cables were found to lead to a radio transmitting device programmed to begin emitting high-frequency terahertz beams. At exactly 4 o'clock that afternoon, Mark Kellner took the phone call at 10 Downing Street. "We've done it!" he exclaimed. "A block of flats in West London, 3 dishes. They're disconnecting them now." Cobra was still in session. Around the table there was a murmur of disbelief that swelled in volume and became a roar of triumph. "We're going to keep looking," Kellner said. "There's always a faint chance that SCORPIA put other dishes in place as backup. But if there are any others, we'll find them too, and I think we can say that the immediate crisis is over." At Liverpool Street, Alan Blunt and Miss Jones were also told the news. "What do you think?" Miss Jones asked. Blunt shook his head. "SCORPIA are more clever than that. If these dishes have been found, it's only because they were meant to be found." "So Kellner is wrong again?" "The man's a fool." Blunt glanced at his watch. "We don't have much time." Miss Jones looked at him. "All we have is Alex Rider." Alex was on the other side of London. He had been picked up outside the bank station at the agreed time the night before, but not by car. A scruffy young woman he had never seen before walked past him, whispering 2 words as she went by, and thrusting a tube ticket in his hands. "Follow me," she said. She led him into the station and onto a train. And then onto the train. She led him into the station and onto a train. She didn't speak to him again. Standing some distance away in the carriage, her eyes fastened as if she was nothing to do with him. They changed trains twice, waiting until the last moment as the doors slid shut, and then suddenly stepping out onto the platform. If anyone were following them, she would see. Finally, they emerged at King's Cross Station. She left Alex in the street, signalling for him to wait. A few minutes later, a taxi pulled up. Alex Ryder, yes, get in. Get in. It was all done very smoothly as they moved off. Alex knew that it would have been impossible for any MI6 agents to have followed them, which was, of course, exactly what Scorpia had planned. He was taken to a different house, different house to the one he had visited, when he first arrived back in London. This was on the edge of Regent's Park. A man and a woman were waiting for him, and he recognized them as the fake Italian parents who had accompanied him through Heathrow. They led him upstairs and showered him into a shabby bed with a room with a bathroom attached. There was a late supper waiting for him on the tray. They left him there, locking the door behind them. There was no telephone. Alex checked the window. The window that was locked too. And now it was 1:30 on the next day, and Alex was sitting on the bed, looking out of the window at the trees. On the bed, Alex was sitting on the bed, looking out of the windows, and windows had trees and Victorian railings of the park. He was feeling a little sick. He had begun to think that Scorpia simply planned to leave him here until 4 o'clock. They wanted him to die with their children in London, and that reminded him of the nano shells which he knew were inside him and resting inside his heart. He remembered the prick of the needle. The smiling face of Dr. Steiner as he injected him with death. The thought of it made his skin crawl. Was he really doomed to spend the last hours of his life here, in this room, sitting on an unmade bed, alone? The door opened. Now walked in, followed by Julia Rothman. She was wearing an expensive coat, grey, with a white fur collar, buttoned up to her neck. Another designer label. Her black hair was immaculate. Her makeup as much as mask as the ones that had been worn at her party at the Windows Palace. Her smile was brilliant red. Her eyes seemed more dazzling than ever, highlighted by perfect applied black eyeliner. Alex, she exclaimed. She sounded genuinely delighted to see him, but Alex knew that everything about her was fake. Nothing was to be trusted. I wondered if you were going to come, Alex commented. Of course I was going to come, Alex commented. Of course I was going to come, my dear. It's just that this is a rather busy day. How are you, Alex? I am so pleased to see you. Did you really kill her? I asked. He was casually dressed in a loose jacket and jeans, trainers and white sweatshirt. Miss Rothman scowled. Niall, do you have to be so direct? He shrugged. He's talking about Miss Jones, of course. And I suppose we do need to know what happened. The mission was a success? Yes, Alex noted. This was the most dangerous part. He knew he couldn't talk too much. He was afraid of giving himself away. He was horribly conscious of the brace. It fitted well, but it had to be distorting his speech, at least a bit. The wire across his teeth was transparent, but even so, surely Miss Worthman would notice it. So what happened? Nell asked. I managed to get inside her flat. It all went exactly like you said. I used the gun, and then I took the lift back down. And I was just on my way out when the two guys behind the desk grabbed me. Alex had spent half the night rehearsing this. Don't know how they found out it was me, but before I could do anything, they had me on the floor with my hands cuffed behind my back. Go on. Miss Rothman was gazing at him. Her eyes could have been trying to suck him in. They took me somewhere, a cell. This part was easier. Alex was actually telling a version of the truth. It was underneath Liverpool Street. They left me there overnight, and then Blunt saw me the next day. What did he say? Not a lot. He knew I was working for you. They got satellite photographs of me arriving at Madagascar. No, said Miss Rothman. That makes sense, he said. I've always had a feeling we've been under surveillance. He didn't want to know very much, Alex went on. He didn't really want to talk to me, he said. I was going to be questioned somewhere out of London. I was left hanging around there for a bit, and a car came to collect me. You were handcuffed? Miss Whitman asked. Not this time. That was their mistake. It was just an ordinary car. There was a driver in the front and an MI6 man in the back with me. I didn't know where they were taking me, and I didn't want to go. I didn't really care what happened. I didn't even care if I was killed. I waited until they got a bit of speed up, and I threw myself at the driver. I managed to put my hands over his eyes. There was nothing much he could do. He lost control and the car crashed. Quite a few cars crashed, Miss Rothman remarked. Yeah, but I was lucky. Everything sort of went upside down, but the next thing I knew, we'd stopped and I was able to get out and run away. Eventually I reached a phone box and called the number he gave me, and here I am. Now I'd been watching him closely through all this. How did it feel, Alex? He asked, killing Miss Jones. I didn't feel anything. Not nodded. It was the same for me. The first time, but you will learn to enjoy it. That'll come with time. You've done very well, Alex. Miss Rothman spoke the word, but still she sounded a bit doubtful. I have to say, I'm quite astonished by your daring escape. I saw it on the news, and I could hardly believe it. But you've certainly passed the test. You really are one of us. Does that mean you'll take me back to Venice? Not quite yet. Miss Rothman thought for a moment, and Alex could see she was coming to a decision. We're just at the critical point in a certain operation, she revealed. It might interest you to see the climax. It's going to be quite spectacular. What do you think? Alex shrugged. He mustn't look too keen. I don't mind, he said. You meant Dr. Lieberman? You met Dr. Lieberman? Dr. Lieberman? You've met Dr. Lieberman. You were there at Consulta where dear Niall dealt with him. It seems only right that you should see the fruits of his handiwork. He smiled again. I'd like to have you with me at the end, so you can watch me die, Alex thought. I'd like to be there, he replied. Otherwise, now and a smile seemed to freeze. But I'm afraid we're going to have to search you, she said. I do trust you, but as you learn, we'll go for a while. We don't leave anything to chance. You were taken prisoner by MI6. It's always possible that you will somehow contaminate without knowing it. So before we leave here, I want you to go into the bathroom with Nell. He'll give you a thorough examination, and we've got a complete change of clothes. Everything has to come off, Alex. It's a bit embarrassing, I know, but I'm sure you'll understand. I got nothing to hide. Alex said, but he couldn't help running his tongue over the brace. He was certain that she'd seen it. Of course you haven't. I'm just being overcautious. Let's do it. Now jerked the thumb in the direction of the bathroom. He seemed amused by the whole idea. 20 minutes later, Alex and Niall came downstairs. Alex was now dressed in loose-fitting jeans with a round-necked jersey. Niall brought the clothes with him, along with fresh socks, trainers and pants. Miss Jones had been right. If he'd had so much as a penny on him, Niall would have found it, and Alex had been thoroughly searched. But Niall had noticed the brace. Alex's mouth was the one place he hadn't looked. Well, Miss Waterman said. Miss Waterman asked. She was in a hurry to leave. He's clean, Niall answered. Good, then we can go. There was a grandfather clock in the hall, standing in the corner on the black and white tiled floor. As Alex moved towards the front door, it struck the hour. 2 o'clock. Is that time already? Miss Waterman said. She reached out and stroked Alex's cheek. You have just 2 hours left, Alex. 2 hours until what? He asked. In 2 hours' time, you'll know. You'll know. You'll know everything. In 2 hours' time, you'll know everything. She opened the door. There was a car waiting for them outside. It took them across London, heading south. They drove around Aldwych and over Waterloo Bridge. And for a moment, Alex gazed out over one of the most startling views of the capital. The Houses of Parliament and Big Ben, with the Millennium Wheat on the opposite bank. What would it look like 2 hours from now? Alex tried to imagine the police cars screaming. Policeman screaming. I tried to imagine the ambulances and police cars screaming across London, the crowd staring in disbelief, the undersized bodies strewn over the pavement. It would be like another world war, but without a single shot being fired. And then they were on the south banks of the river, making their way through Waterloo, heading east. The buildings they passed became older, and last year it was as if they had travelled not just a few miles, but a few 100 years. I sat in the back next to Niall. Miss Rossman was in the front with a blank-faced driver. Nobody spoke. It was warm inside the car. The sun was shining, but Alex could feel the tension that made the air cold. He was certain they were heading for some high point where invisible sword must be concealed, but he had no idea where to expect. An office block, perhaps a building under construction. He stared out of the window, his head pressed against the glass, trying to stay calm. They stopped. The car had pulled up on a strange, empty road that ran for about 15 metres before coming to a dead end. Miss Rossman and Niall climbed out of the car, and Alex followed, examining his surroundings with a sinking heart. It looked as if they hadn't taken him to the dishes after all. There was no tall buildings inside, not for at least a mile around. The streets almost as wide as it was long, ran between two rows of dilapidated shops. The lower floors boarded up, the windows broken and discoloured. The street itself was covered with rubbish, scraps of newspapers, dented cans and old crisp packets. But it was at the building at the end that commanded his attention. The street led to a church that would have more suited to Rome or Venice than London. It had obviously been abandoned long ago and had deteriorated badly, yet it still struggled to be magnificent. two huge cracked pillars supported a triangular roof. Over the main entrance, marble steps led up to huge doors made of solid bronze, but greener rather than gold. The great bulk of the church rose up behind, surmounted by a dome which glinted in the afternoon sun. Statues lined the steps and dotted across the roof. Window had been brutalized by time and elements. Some were missing arms. Many had no faces. Once they had been saints and angels. 200 years standing in London turned them into cripples. Why are we here? Alex asked. Miss Rothman was standing next to him, looking up at the church. I thought you'd like to witness the conclusion of Invisible Sword. Don't know anything about Invisible Sword. Without giving himself away, Hank was searching for any sign of satellite dishes, but there didn't seem to be any on the dome. And anyway, as impressive as it wasn't tall enough. The dishes had to be higher. What is this place? Miss Rossman looked at him curiously. You know, Alex, I swear there's something different about you. Alex quietly closed his mouth, hiding the brace. He looked at her quizzically. Now, did you search him from top to bottom? Yes, just like you told me. I thought you'd have trusted me by now. Alex protested. But this time, he looked away so she wouldn't see his teeth. I did exactly what you told me to, and I nearly got killed. I don't trust anyone, Alex. Not even Niall. She paused. Since you asked, this building is a church of forgotten saints. It's not actually a church, it's an oratory. It was built in the 19th century by a community of Catholic priests living in the area. They were rather odd. They were rather odd. They worshipped a collection of saints who had fallen into obscurity. You'd be amazed to see how many saints there are who we've completely forgotten about. Sir Fiacre, for example, is the patron saint of gardens and taxi drivers. They must keep him busy. St. Ambrose looks after beekeepers, and where would tailors be without St. Homo Bonus? Did you know that undertakers and perfume makers both have their own saint? They were worshipped here too. I suppose it's not surprising the church fell into disuse. It was bombed in the wall, and it's been emptied ever since. SCORPIA took over it a few years ago. As you'll see, we've made one or two interesting adjustments. Do you want to come inside? Alex shrugged. Whatever you say. He had no choice. For some reason, Julia Rothman chosen to bring in here and presumably he would still be here when the terahertz beams were fired across London. He glanced at the dome again, wondering if success would be enough to protect him. He doubted it. The three of them walked forward. The car had left. Alex looked at the shop to either side. Not a single one was occupied. He wondered if he was being watched. It occurred to him that anyone wanting to enter the church would have to come this way, and it would be easy enough to keep this way. And it would be easy enough to keep them under surveillance with hidden cameras. They reached the main entrance, which sensed their arrival and opened electronically. This was interesting. Miss Rothman had spoken of adjustments, and it was clear that the oratory wasn't quite as derelict as it first appeared. They entered a grand hall rectangular in shape that served an antechamber to the main body of the church. Everything was grey. The huge flagstones, the ceilings, the stone pillars that supported it. Alex looked around him as his eyes grew accustomed to the dim light. There were circular windows on both sides. But the glass was so thick it seemed to block out most of the daylight rather than allow it in. Everything was faded and dusty. 2 statues, more forgotten saints, stood either side of a cracked and broken front. There was a faint smell of damp in the air, and it was easy to believe that nobody had been here for 50-odd years. Alex coughed and listened to the sound travel up. The chamber was utterly silent, and there seemed to be no obvious way up. The street was behind them, a solid wall blocked away by her head. Then Julie Watman walked across the floor. Her stiletto heels rapped against the stone, creating echoes that flitted into the shadows. Her movement had been sort of signalled. There was a loud buzz and overhead. A series of arc lamps concealed in the walls and ceiling flashed on. Beams of brilliant white light crashed down from every direction. At the same time, 5 panels silently opened, one after the other. They were part of the wall built into it. Disguised to look like brick. Now Alex saw that they were in fact solid steel. More light spilled out, and with it came the sound of machinery and of frantic activity. Welcome to invisible sword. Miss Rossman announced, and in that moment Alex knew why she had brought him here. He was proud of what she had done. She couldn't hide the pleasure in her voice. She wanted to see. Alex stepped through the opening and into a scene he would never forget. It was a classical church, just like the monastery on Malagosto. SCORPIA seemed to enjoy cloaking itself in religion. The floor was made up of black and white tiles. There were stained glass windows, a richly carved wood pulpit, even a few old pews. The remains of organ clung to one wall, but looking at the pipes, the dome curved above his head. Some broken, other missing. Few old pews. The remaining organ clung to the wall, but looking at the pipes, some broken, other missing. I think that would never play again. The dome curved above his head. The underside painted with more saints, men and women holding the various objects with which they were associated. Furniture, shoes, library books, and loaves of bread. All of them had been forgotten. All of them were frozen together in a single great tableau overhead. The church had been filled with electronic equipment, computers, TV monitors, industrial lights, a series of switches and levers that couldn't have been more out of place. 2 steel gantries had been built on one on either side, with armed guards positioned at intervals. There must have been 20 or 30 people involved. It must have been about 30 or 40 people involved in this operation. At least half of them carrying machine guns. Alex took all of this in. The voice rang out throughout, amplified through the speakers, bolted into the walls. 6 minutes until launch. 6 minutes and counting. I see that he had arrived at the centre of the web, and even as he said it, his tongue travelled to the roof of his mouth and pressed the switch which Millers had built into his brace. Mark Kellner, the Prime Minister, Director of Communications, had got it wrong again. SCORPIA hadn't attached to turrets, but dishes to any tall building. They attached it to them to a hot air balloon. 6 men dressed in ovals were inflating it. There was plenty of floor space, and the dome was as high as a 6-story building. The balloon was painted blue and white. Once released, it would blend in with the sky. How were they going to release it? Alex wondered. The church was completely enclosed by the dome. Even so, that had to be their plan. There was a flame under the balloon with a single burner pointing upwards, and beneath there was a frame under the balloon with a single burner upwards, and beneath that a platform about 20 meters square. The balloon was strangely old-fashioned, like something out of a Victorian adventure story. The platform couldn't have been more high-tech, though built out of sort of lightweight plastic with a low railing to protect the equipment it carried. Alice recognised the equipment instantly. There were 4 dishes, one in each corner, facing the 4 points of the compass. They were dull silver in colour. About 3 meters in diameter, with thin metal rods forming a triangle that produced from the centre. Wires connected the dishes to a series of complicated-looking boxes, which took up most of the space in the centre of its platform. Black pipes ran up to the burner, carrying propane gas from the tanks, which were stacked next to the boxes. The balloon was almost inflated. It had been lying spread out on the ground, but even as Alice watched, the air in the envelope was heated by 3 men using a second burner device, and it began to lift itself limply up. More men ran forward to hold the platform steady. There were 2 ropes, one at each end, and I saw that the whole thing had been tethered to a pair of iron rings set on the floor. Now you understood what SCORPIA intended to do. Judy must have anticipated the government scientists must have anticipated that government scientists would work out how the footballers at Heathrow Airport had died. She knew that they would be searching London for satellite dishes, so she had kept them hidden until the last moment. The hot air balloon would lift them up into the air. They would only need to stay there for a few minutes. By the time anyone realised what was happening, it would be too late. The golden nylon shells would have dissolved, and thousands of children would be dead. And he noticed that Niall had taken off his jacket and was strapping something to his back. It was a leather harness with 2 lethal-looking weapons. Not quite swords, not quite daggers, but something in between. Alex remembered how Dr. Liverman had died, and now knew that Niall was an expert at Aikido, the ninja art of sword fighting. He could slice with the swords, or he could throw them. Either way, he was lightning fast. Alex knew he could deliver death in an instant. There was nothing he could do but stand and watch. He had no gadgets, no hidden weapons. Miss Webber might have brought the story of his capture and escape. But her eyes were still on him. In truth, they had never wavered. He was still suspicious. If so much as sneeze without her permission, she would give the order and he would be cut down. How long had it been since he had activated the homing device? 60 seconds, maybe more. I felt the wire running across his teeth and tried to imagine the signal being transmitted to MI6. How long would it take them to arrive? Miss Wolfman stepped closer and laid a hand on his shoulder. Her fingers creased the side of his neck. She ran her tongue, small and moist, over her lips. Let me explain to you what we are doing here, Alex. She began. As a member of SCORPIA, I'm sure you'd like to know. Are you in for a balloon ride? Alex asked. No, I'm not going anywhere, she smiled. 2 days ago, we made certain demands. These demands were direct against the American government. But we made it clear that if they did not obey, it would be the British who would suffer the consequences. The deadline runs out. She looked at her watch. In less than 15 minutes, the Americans had not done as we asked, and now it is time for the punishment to begin. What are you going to do? And they asked. He couldn't keep the horror out of his voice because, of course, he already knew. In a few minutes, the balloon will be completely inflated, and we will raise it above the church. Ropes will keep it tethered at exactly 100 meters, and when it reaches that point, the machinery which you can see on the platform will activate immediately. High-frequency terahertz beams will then be transmitted over London for exactly 2 minutes, and at that moment, I'm afraid a very large number of people will die. Why? Alex could barely speak. What did you ask the Americans? What do you want them to do? As a matter of fact, we didn't want them to do anything. The demands were ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. We asked them to disarm. We told them to pay $1 billion. We knew they'd never agree. Then why ask? Because what our client really wants is revenge. Revenge for constant interfering and bullying for the British and the Americans in masses. That don't concern them. What he wants is to ensure that the special friendship between the two countries is destroyed forever. And this is how it's going to happen. And this is how it's going to happen. I'm afraid they'll agree. I'm afraid that a great many people are about to die in London. The death would be sudden and totally unexpected. It would be as if they've been struck down by an invisible sword. The whole country will be in shock, and then the news will come out. They died because the Americans wouldn't agree to our demands. They died because the Americans refused to help the ally who stands by them. Can you imagine what the newspaper will say? Can you imagine what the people think? By tomorrow morning, the British will hate the Americans. The next, in a few months, invisible sword will strike again, but next time it will be in New York. And next time our demands will be more reasonable. We'll ask for less, and the Americans will give us what we want. Because they will have seen what happened in London, and they won't want it to happen again. They'll have no choice, and that'll be the end of the British-American alliance. You see, the Americans couldn't care less about the British. They've only been concerned about themselves. That's what everyone will say. You have no idea how much hatred will be created. One country humiliated, the other one crushed. And SCORPIA will have earned £100 million along the way. She paused, as if waiting for him to congratulate her. Alice was meant to be a member of her organisation. When he was so cute, her father would have been glad to stand at her side, but Alice couldn't do it. He simply confided in himself. He couldn't even pretend. You can't do it, he whispered. You can't kill children to get rich. The words were no sooner out of his mouth than he knew he had made a mistake. Julia Rothman's reaction was as fast as a snake, as fast as scorpion. One moment that soft, gorgeous smile had been on her lips. Next she was rigid, alert. Her whole conscience was focused on Max. Now I looked over, sensing something was wrong. I waited for the act to fall, and then it came. Children. Miss Rothman murmured. I never said anything about children. But there will be children. I tried frantically to backtrack. Adults and children. No, Alex. This was seemed almost amused. You know that children are the target? I never told you that. So somebody else must have. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. She was examining him minutely, closing in on him, and suddenly she saw it. I thought there was something different about you, she snapped. What's that you've got on your teeth? It was too late to hide. Alex opened his mouth. Oh, a brace. You weren't wearing a brace in Positano. I didn't have it in. Take it out. It doesn't come out. It will, with the hammer. Alex had no choice. He reached into his mouth and took out the piece of plastic. Now moved closer, his eyes filled with curiosity. Let me see it, Alex. Like a naughty boy eating gum, he held out his hand. The brace was letting in his palm. It was obvious it was no ordinary brace. He could see some of the circuitry leading to the switch he had activated. Had he pressed it in time? Drop it! Miss Waterman commanded. Alice let the brace fall to the floor, and she stepped forward. The foot came down, and Alex heard the sound of breaking plastic as she grounded into the tiles. When she removed her foot, the brace was cracked in half. The wire bent. If it hadn't transmitting before, it certainly wasn't now. His mouth. I didn't know what to say. It was the one place it didn't look. But you know it turned back on ice. You didn't do it. Did you, Alex? Alex was voice called. You didn't kill Miss Jones is still alive. He said nothing. Miss Waterman stared at him for what seemed like an eternity. And then she struck. He was faster and stronger than he would have guessed. Around slamming inside of his face, the sound of it echoed all around. Like staggered back, dazed. The whole head was ringing, and you could feel his cheek glowing red. This was my signal, and two guards with machine guns stepped forward to sandax him, one on either side. We may be expecting company, she announced in a loud, clear voice. I want units 3, 4, and 5 to take up defensive positions until 3, 4, and 5 to the pyramid. An amplified voice relayed the command, and 20 of the men ran forward, their feet stamping on the metal gantries, heading for the front of the church. Miss Waterman gazed at Alex with eyes that had lost their disguise. They were utterly cool. Miss Jones may be alive, she spat. But you won't be. You have very little time left, to live, Alex. Why do you think I brought you here? It's because I want you to see for yourself. No suspicious reason to want to kill you. But even though, my dear, you're already dead. She looked past him. The balloon was fully inflated, floating in the space between the floor of the dome and the platform. Its deadly cargo was underneath it, hovering a metro over the ground. The ropes were ready. The dishes were set to automatic. Start the launch, Miss Waterman commanded. It's time now they saw the power of invisible sword. Chapter 18. High resolution. Launch status red. Launch status red. The disembodied voice rang out as one of the SCORPIA technicians sitting in front of a bank of machinery reached out and pressed the button. There was a single metallic click, and then the hum of machinery as the wheel turned somewhere overhead. Alex looked up. At first glance, it seemed to him those saints and agents were flying apart, as if it had come to life and it was drifting down to the pews of praise. Then with a gasp, the roof was moving. The dome of the oratory had been reconstructed with hidden hydraulic arms. It was slowly pulling in. A crack appeared and widened. You could see the sky, an inch at a time. The great dome was folding back, splitting into two halves. Miss Waterman was staring upwards, her face filled with delight. Oh, now did Alex see how much planning had gone into this operation. The entire church had been adapted. It must have cost millions for a single moment. And nobody had guessed. Police and the army had been searching all over London, examining every structure at least 100 metres high. But the dishes had been hidden at ground level, and only now would a hot air balloon carry them above the city. Certainly someone would notice it. By the time they made it to the desolate area, it would be too late. The dishes would have done their work. Thousands of children would have died, and Alex would be one of them. This Waterman hadn't killed him because she had no need to. She said it herself. He was already dead. Raise the balloon. Miss Sutton gave the order in a soft voice, but her words were quite clear in the vast space of the church. The burner under the envelope was alight and sending a red and blue flame shooting up. 2 men darted forward and pulled the release mechanism. And at once the platform began to rise. The entire roof had disappeared. It was as if the oratory had more than enough room for the balloon to begin shutting. And the lights watched it float smoothly up, travelling in a straight line, and as if this had been rehearsed. There was no wind, even the weather seemed to be on Scorpia's side. Alex looked around him. His face was still smarting where Miss Watman had slapped him, but he ignored the pain. He was horribly aware of the seconds ticking away, but there was nothing he could do. Now was watching him with as much hatred as he had ever seen in a man's face. The 2 samurai swords produced just above his shoulders, and Alex knew he was itching to use them. He had betrayed Scorpia, and worse, he had betrayed Niall. He had humiliated the man in front of Judy Watman, and for that, Niall would make him pay by cutting him to pieces. He needed only the tiny excuse. The 2 armed guards still flanked Alex. Others watched him from the gantries and their positions at the entrances. He was helpless. And when was MI6? He glanced at the broken pieces of the brace, wished now that he had activated the trigger the moment he had seen the church. But how could he have known? How could anyone have known? Alex, before you die, there's something I want to tell you. This woman confided. I'm not interested. Oh, I think you will be, my dear, because you see, it's about your father and mother. There's something you ought to know. I didn't want to hear it, and he had come to a decision. He was going to die, but he wouldn't just stand there. Somehow he was going to hurt Judy Watman. She had lied to him. She had manipulated him. She had almost made him betray everything he believed in. She had tried to make him part of Scorpia like his father, but whatever his father had been, he would never be the same. He was tensed about to throw himself at her, wondering if now would cut him down before the guards. But it did. And then one of the windows shattered and something exploded inside the church. Thick smoke blowed out, spreading across the black and white tiles, devouring everything. At the same time began the shatter of the shouting of the machine guns. And at the same time came the shatter of machine guns fire and a second explosion. This one outside. Judy Watman staggered and fell sideways. Now twisted around, the white blotches on his face suddenly moved more livid than ever. His eyes wide and staring. Alex moved. He lashed out at the guard on his left, swinging his elbow into the man's stomach and feeling the bones sink into soft flesh. The man doubled up. The other guard turned, and Alex provided on one foot, kicking hard with the other. The heel smashed into the barrel of the man's machine gun a fraction before it fired, and Alex felt the bullets pass over his shoulder, and a scream as one of the other guards was hit. That made one less anyway. He charged, head down, and slammed at his mouth like a maiden bull. The guard cried out, Alex punched upwards, his fist driving into the man's throat. The guard was thrown off his feet and sent crashing to the floor. Alex was free. Everything was confused. Smoke coiled and twisted. More machine gun fire. Another explosion. I saw the balloon rise slowly above the church. It hadn't been hit. It had passed through the gaping roof and was continuing its journey up into the London sky. Suddenly he knew what was happening down there. That was where he had to be. The balloon carried the equipment that was set to automatic. MI6 were here. They might invade the church and capture Judy Watman. They might bring the balloon back down, but they could only be minutes left. It might already be too late. There was only one thing Alex could do. The boom was trailing to 2 ropes that would act as anchors when the platform reached the correct height. He sprinted towards him. A man blocked his way, and Alex automatically dropped him with a roundhouse kick. He grabbed the nearest rope and felt a jerk as the blow lifted him off the ground. "Stop him!" Miss Watman screamed. She had seen him, but the smoke was still cloaking him from the other guards. But there was a burst of machine gun fire, but it missed slicing the rope a few meters below his feet. Alex looked down and saw the ground was already quite a long way away, and then he was pulled out of the church, up into the open air, leaving Niall and Miss Rothman and the swirling chaos behind. Half blinded by smoke and shocked by the suddenness of the attack, Miss Rothman had to waste precious seconds forcing herself to calm down. She strode over to the television monitor, trying to make sense of the situation. She could see soldiers in black combat dresses, their faces covered by helmets, taking up with positions outside the church. Well, she could deal with them in her own time. Right now, the boy was all that mattered. Niall, she snapped. Get after him. Niall had been hit by flying fragments of glass from the first explosion. For one, he seemed slow to react, confused. Now! He screamed. Niall moved. One rope still hung down, shivering in front of him. He grabbed hold of it and, like Alice, was jerked into the air. The platform was now 40 metres above the ground level. It had another 16 metres travelled before the dishes would activate. The extra weight, Alex on one rope, Niall on the other, had slowed it down, but the burner was still heating the air inside the envelope. A digital display on one of the metal boxes was flickering and changing, measuring the distance 41, 42. The machines knew nothing of what was taking place below. That didn't matter. They would do what they had been designed for. The dishes were waiting for the signal to start transmitting. The balloon continued to rise. There were just 4 minutes left. The missionaries had acted immediately. There had been 5 SIS teams on permanent standby in different parts of London, and as soon as Alex's signal had been received, she had alerted the team nearest to him, with the other 4 moving in as backup. 8 men were slowly in on the church, all of them dressed in full combat gear, including flame-proof black overalls, belt kits, body armour, Kevlar vest, and MKC combat helmets, complete with throat mics. They were carrying a variety of weapons. Most of them had a SIG 9mm pistol strapped to their thigh. One had a sawed-off plump action shotgun, which would be used to blast open the church doors. Other carried axes, knives, maglights, and flashbang grenades. And each man was equipped with the same high-powered semi-automatic submachine gun, the Heckler and Koch 9mm MP5, the favourite assault weapon of the SAS. As they spread out across the seemingly empty street, they barely looked human. They could have been radio control-led robots sent from some future war. They knew that this church was their target, but their operation was every soldier's nightmare. Normally, when the SIS go in, they will have been briefed by the police and regular army. They will have access to a huge computer database, giving them vital information about the building they are about to attack, the thickness of the walls, the positions of windows and doors. If no information is available, they can still produce a 3-dimensional computer image by simply inputting whatever details they could see outside. But this time, there was nothing. The Church of Forgotten States was a blank. There were only minutes left. The instructions were clear. Find Alice Ryder and get him out. Find the dishes and destroy them. But even after everything had happened, Alan Blunt had made sure they understood their priorities. The dishes mattered more. The soldier had arrived just in time to see the dome open and the balloon start to appear above the church. They were too late. If they had come equipped with stingers, heat-sinking missiles, they could have brought it down. This was the middle of London. They were prepared for what was essentially a hostage situation. They had counted on a full-out war. The balloon rose in front of their eyes and they were unable to stop it. They could see it at once, but they needed to get onto the roof of the auto, but first they had to reach it. One of the men made a snap decision and shot a 9.4mm heat warhead rocket from a plastic firing tube. The missile looped towards the balloon but fell short, smashing through an upper window and detonating inside the church. This was the explosion that had given Alex his chance. It was the signal for the SCORPIA meant to show himself. Suddenly the SAS team found themselves under fire from both sides as a blazing torrent of bullets were equipped from the abandoned shops. Somebody threw a grenade. A huge ball of flame shattered a concrete, ripped through air. One of the men was sent flying, arm and legs to limp. He crashed to the ground and lay still. The SAS hadn't been expecting a war, but in seconds they found themselves in the middle of one. They were outnumbered. The church was seemingly impregnable. The balloon was still rising when the soldiers had dropped to his knee and was talking furiously into his radio transmitter. This is Delta 1-3. We haven't engaged the enemy and are coming under heavy fire. We need immediate backup. Urgent satellite dishes have been located. Request immediate airstrike to take them out fast. They're being carried by a hot air balloon over the target. Repeat, they are in a balloon. We cannot reach them. An airstrike must respond. Condition red. Over. The message was relayed instantly to headquarters. Strike command at RAF High Wycombe, 30 miles outside London. It took them a few precious seconds to understand what they were being told, and a few more precious seconds to believe it. In less than a minute, 2 Tornado GR4 fighter jets were taxiing towards the main runway. Each plane was equipped with paved way to 1-1 general purpose bombs with built-in laser guidance system and movable tail fins. And pilots were fully trained in low altitude position attacks. Flying at just over 700 miles per hour, they would reach the church in less than 5 minutes. They'd blast the balloon out of the sky. That was the plan. Unfortunately, they didn't have 5 minutes. This was the first real test for the joint rapid reaction force that had been created to tackle any major terrorist alert. But everything had happened too quickly. Scorpia had left it to the very last moment before revealing their hand. By the time the planes got there, it would be too late. This rider pulled himself up the rope, one hand over the other, keeping a loop between his feet. He had done the same often enough in the school gym, but he had no need to remind himself this wasn't quite the same. For a start, even when he stopped to rest, he still went up. The balloon was rising steadily. The hot air inside the envelope weighed 21 grams per cubic foot. The cooler air of the London sky weighed roughly 28 grams per cubic foot. This was the simple arithmetic that made the balloon fly, and that was exactly what Alex was doing. If he had looked down, he wouldn't have seen the ground 50 meters below. He didn't look down. There was something else that was different from a gym school. If he fell from his height, he would die. But his platform was less than 10 meters above him. He could see the great rectangle blocking out of the sky. Above it, the burner was still gazing, shooting a tongue of flame into the bulging blue and white envelope. Alex's shoulder and arms were aching. Worse than that, every moment sent pain shuddering through his bones. His wrists felt as if they were being torn apart. He heard another explosion, a sustained burst of machine gun fire. He wondered if the SAS was shooting at him. If they had seen the balloon, and they must have. They wanted to bring it down, no matter what the cost. What did his own life matter compared with the thousands who would die if the dishes reached 100 meters? The sword gave him new strength. If a stray bullet caught him while he was dangling from the rope, he would fall. For more than one reason, he needed to pull on that platform. He gritted his teeth and pulled himself up. 65 meters, 66. The balloon was unstoppable, but the distance between Alex and his goal was shortening. There was a third explosion, and he risked down. Almost at once, he reached the end. The ground was a long way below. The SAS men were the size of toy soldiers. You could see them taking up their position in the street that led to a church, preparing to storm the front entrance. Scorpia men were in the derelict shops on either side. The explosion that Alex had just heard must have come from a hand grenade. But battle meant nothing to him. He had seen something else that filled him with dread. A man was climbing the other rope, and there could be no mistaking the white blotches on his face. It was Niall. He was moving slowly, as if out of breath. Alex was surprised by that. He knew how fit and strong Niall was. He could almost see the muscles rippling beneath the man's shirt as he reached up with one hand. He had to disable the dishes permanently before Niall arrived, and that he wouldn't stand a chance. Something struck his hand, and he cried out. Alex had still been crying, even with his eyes fixed on Niall, and he hadn't seen that he had at last reached the platform. He had hit his knuckle against the edge of one of the dishes. For a moment he wondered if he could reach out and pull the bloody thing off, let it fall and smash somewhere below, but he could see at once that the dishes were secured with metal braces. He'd have to find another way. At first that meant climbing onto the platform itself. This wasn't going to be easy, and yet he had to move quickly, giving himself as much time as possible before Niall caught up with him. He leaned backwards and let go of the rope with one hand. His stomach lurched, and he thought he was going to fall. Then he climbed and grabbed hold of the edge of the railing that ran all the way around the platform. With a last effort, he heaved himself up and over, toppling down the other side. He landed awkwardly, banging his knee on the edge of a propane gas cylinder. He let the pain ripple through him as he tried to work out what to do. He examined the balloon. There were 2 propane tanks feeding the burner, less than a metre above his head. Thick, blank tube made of rubber or plastic connected them. And Alex wondered if he could unfasten them and make the flame go out. Will the balloon sink, or will there be enough hot air in the envelope to keep it rising? He examined the large black boxes that were clustered together in the centre of the platform. They were made of metal, and each one had a single blinking light, currently yellow, and a tangled network of cables joined them all together. There were 4 of them, and Alex realised that each one was connected to a satellite dish. The power was on. The dishes were primed. The terahertz beams hadn't yet activated, but he noticed a 5th smaller box. It had to be some sort of master control. It had a window set into the surface. A digital readout, 77, 78, 79. Eyes watched as the altitude was measured and the balloon moved even nearer to the point of destination. And suddenly he had the answer. Disconnect the dishes. Do it before the platform reached 100 metres. Do it before Manal arrived. How much time did he have? They briefly considered somehow unfastening the rope that now was climbing, but even if it was possible, he would never be able to bring himself to do it. To kill someone in such a cold-blooded way? Anyway, it would take too long. No, the 4 twinkling lights were his targets. Somehow he had to turn them off. He got steadily to his feet and took out a small step. The platform swaying slightly beneath him. For a moment he was afraid. Was the platform even designed to hold his weight? Moved too fast and it might tip up and throw him off. He grimaced and edged forward. Apart from the hiss of the gas-feeding flame, the hot air balloon was absolutely silent. Somewhere inside of me, Alex wished he could simply sit back and enjoy the ride. The majestic envelope soaring above into the sky, the views of London, but he had perhaps less than a minute before Niall got there. And how long until the balloon reached the right height? Reached the right height. 83, 84. God, it was like being back in Murmansk again. The nod sounded though that one had been going down, not up, and it had been attached to a nuclear bomb. Why him? I fell to his knees and reached out for the first of the cables. He quickly examined it. It was thick, attached to the master control by a solid-looking socket. He tried to unscrew, but it didn't budge. He wouldn't have to tear it out in such a way that it would be impossible to reconnect. His hands closed around the cable and he pulled it with all his might. Nothing happened. The connection was truly strong. Metal screwed into metal, and the cables of themselves were too thick. He needed a knife or a pair of scissors. He had nothing. When he leaned back and pressed his foot against the metal box, he strained, still gripping the cable. Using his whole body weight, the balloon was still rising. A wisp of clouds slid past, or maybe it was smoke from the fight below. Alex swore through gritted teeth. The entire consciousness was focused on the cable and its connection, and suddenly it came free. Alex felt the cable tear, fell back, his head slamming into the platform railing. Ignoring the new pain, he dragged himself back up. You could see the separate ends, the severed wires sprouting out of his hands. There were deep welts in his palm, and he had hurt his head. When he looked, he saw that one of the yellow lights had blinked out. One of the dishes were no longer functioning. 93, 94, there were 3 left, and Alex knew he didn't have enough time to disconnect them all. He was so lunch before he grabbed hold of the second. What else could he do? Once again, he pressed the flats of his feet against the side of the box. He took a deep breath and something flashed in the corner of his eye. Instinctively, Alex threw himself sideways. A samurai sword, half a metre long, sliced the air, so close to his face that he felt it. He noticed that it had been aimed at his throat. For the sun reflecting off the blade, it would have killed him. Now I had reached the platform. He was standing in the corner holding the railing. There had been 2 swords strapped to his back. He had thrown one of them. Now he reached for the other. Alex was lying flat. He couldn't move. There wasn't enough room to do anything. He was an easy target, wedged between the metal boxes and the side of the platform. Above him the flame burned, carrying the balloon for the last few meters. 97, 98, 99, the digital display flickered to the final figure. As the body sat inside the master control, and the lights on the 3 remaining connected boxes changed from yellow to red. The system had been activated. Terahertz signals were being beamed all over London. Ice knew that inside him. It was very hard to go. Banana shells had begun to break up. Now unsheathed the second sword. His So inside the church, Miss Rothman was beginning to realize that the battle was lost. Her men had fought well, and they outnumbered the enemy, but they were simply outclassed. There had many casualties, and 2 more SAS units had arrived, providing backup for the first. She could see the fighting outside was being relayed to her by a series of hidden cameras. It was right in front of her on the television monitors, and one for every angle. The street had been torn apart. A wounded SAS man was being dragged away by 2 of his comrades. Dust and debris leaping up as the surface was strafed by enemy fire. More soldiers were moving from doorway to doorway, lobbing grenades through the windows behind him. This grenade through the window behind him. This was the sort of fighting the SAS had experienced in Northern Ireland and the Middle East. The whole area had been cordoned off. Police cars had moved in from every direction. They couldn't be seen, but their sirens filled the air. This was London. It was nearing the end of a working day. It was impossible to believe that this could really be happening here. Another explosion persists, and thick smoke billowed out of the open dome, and paintwork rained down, flaking off the walls. Most of the Scorpion men had abandoned their position, preferring to take their chances outside. A guard ran up to Miss Rothman, blood streaking his face. "They're inside the church," he asked. "We're finished. I'm leaving." You'll stay at your post," Miss Rothman snapped. "To hell with that!" The guard spat and swore. "Everyone's going. We're all getting out of here." Miss Rothman looked nervous, afraid of being left on her own. Please let me have your gun," she begged. "Sure, why not?" Thank you," she said, and shot him with a single shot burst. She watched the man go spawning, then went over to the monitor. The SAS were in the outer chamber. She could see them lying plastic explosives against the fake brick wall. It was hard to be sure, because she fancied they would need rather more explosives than they were using. She designed the wall herself, and it was solid steel. Even so, they would get through it eventually. They would not relent. She glanced up at the balloon, now straining at the one remaining rope. 100 meters above London, she knew it had reached the correct height. The equipment inside the church had told her this. In just another minute or so, it would all be over. She thought of Alex Ryder somewhere up or above. All in all, it had been a mistake bringing him here. Why had she? To see him die? Of course. She hadn't been there when John Ryder had died, and she wanted to make up for it. And she wanted to make up for it. Missed the father, catch the son. That was why she had risked everything to bring Alex to the church. And she knew the other members of the executive board of Scorpia would be less than pleased. But it didn't matter. The operation would succeed. The SAS were too late. A huge explosion. The whole church shook. 3 of the target's gun pipes keeled over and came crashing down. Brick and plaster fragments hung in the air. Half the television monitors went black, but the steel wall held. She had been right about that. She threw the machine gun down and hurried to a door almost invisible in the wall of a side chapel. It was lucky that Miss Rothman was the sort of person who prepared for everything eventuality, including the need to slip out without being seen. The guard she had killed had been right. It was definitely time to go. Alex lay on his back, his shoulders pressing against the railing of the platform. The first ball that Nan had thrown sliced the plastic 4 centimeters above his head, and it was still there, quivering just beside his neck. Nan had unsheathed the second sword and was balancing it in his hand. He was taking his time. Alex knew that he had no need to hurry. He had nowhere to hide. There was less than 3 meters apart. Alex had seen what Nan could do. There was no way he would miss. And yet, why was he so slow? Taking his hand with the sword, clutching the railing with his other hand, Alex looked at him, examining the handsome, flowered face, searching for something in the man's eyes, and found it. That look, he had seen it before. He remembered Wolf, the SAS soldier. He had trained son. Everything makes sense. The secret weakness that Miss Rothman had mentioned. The reason why Nan had come second, not first. When Augusto, he thought back to the meeting in the bell tower over the monastery. Nan had lingered at the door, unwilling to come forward, holding on to the frame in just the same way that he was holding on to the railing now. No wonder Nan had been so slow climbing up to the balloon. Nan was afraid of heights, but that wasn't going to save Alex. 15 seconds had passed since the light had turned red. Already the nanoshells with their poisonous cargo would be oscillating inside his heart. all over London. Children would be walking home unaware, waiting for buses, pouring in tube station unaware of what was about to happen. The nurse spoke. "This is what I promised would happen to you if you betrayed us," he said. The smile of his face might have been forced, but there could be no doubting what he was about to do. He balanced the sword in his palm of his hand, feeling the weight before he aimed it through. "I said I would kill you, and that's what I'm going to do right now." "Sure now," Alice replied. "But how are you going to get back down?" "What?" The smile faded. "Just look down," Alice went on. "Look how high we are. You can stop at the flame, and the envelope. You know, I don't think that this balloon is going to hold us up, both up." "Shut up!" Now hissed the words. The hand clutching the rail had gone whiter than ever. Alex could see the fingers clenching tighter and tighter. "Look at the people at the cars. Look at the cars. See how tiny they are. Stop it!" And that was when Alex made his move. He already knew what he was going to do. Nala was petrified, unable to react. All her speed and strength had vanished. With a gasp, Alex pulled out the first sword, freeing P from fast. In a moment, he swept it up and slashed through one of the rubber pipes that fed the burner. After that, everything happened very quickly. The servo pipe forward, left and right like a wounded snake. Propane, gas in liquid form, was still being pumped through, and as the servo end whipped past the burner, it ignited, becoming at once a huge ball of flame. The pipe twisted back again and spat its deadly payload in the direction of Nala. Nala just managed to raise the second sword and to start what would be his final throw. He was aiming at Alex's chest, then the fireball hit him. He was in once and disappeared. 1 second he was there, the next he had been blown into the air, a spinning, burning puppet of a man falling to his death 100 meters below. It looked as if Alex was about to follow him. The entire platform was on fire. The plastic metaling. There was burning liquid, propane everywhere, and it was dissolving everywhere it touched. He struggled to his feet as the flames licked towards him. What now? The burner had gone out, but the balloon didn't seem to be falling. The platform, however, would, and very soon. The 4 ropes securing it to the envelope were made of nylon, and all 4 of them were on fire. One of the tiles snapped, and Alex cried out as the platform lifted, almost throwing him over the edge. His eyes darted to the machinery. The electric cables must be fireproof. The little red lights showed him that the 3 remaining dishes were still transmitting. More than a minute must have passed since Sally had appeared, surely. Alex pressed a hand against his chest at a moment, expecting at any moment to feel the stab of pain as the poison broke free and entered his system, but he was still alive, and he knew he had just seconds left to escape from the burning platform. No chance of jumping to safety. He was 100 meters above the ground. It started a snapping sound as the second rope began to break. The fire was out of control. It was burning him. It was burning everything. Alex jumped, not down but up. He leapt off into the first control box, and then, so that his hands caught the metal frame surrounding the burner, he held himself up and stood now. Now he could reach the circular skirt at the bottom of the envelope itself. It was incredible. Looking up, it felt as if he was standing inside a huge circular room. The walls were fabric, but they could have been solid. He was inside the balloon, imprisoned by it. He saw a nylon card. It led all the way to the parachute valve at the very top. Would it take his weight? And then the remaining ropes holding the platform gave away. The platform fell, taking the burner and the dishes with it, disappearing from under Alex's feet. Alex had just had time to win the nylon cord around one hand and grab hold of the fabric of the balloon with the other. Suddenly, he was dangling once again. His arms and wrists took the strain. He wondered if the balloon would crumble and fall. Most of his weight had gone. Only he was left. It stayed where it was. Alex looked down. He couldn't stop himself, and that was where he saw, in the middle of the fire and smoke, the spinning platforms and falling ropes. 3 red lights had gone out. He was sure of it. Either of the flames had destroyed the machinery of the dishes and had deactivated themselves the moment they dropped below 100 meters. The terahertz beams were stopped. Not a single child would die. Nobody was sure where the bag lady had appeared from. Perhaps she had been dozing in the small cemetery behind the Church of Forgotten Saints. Now, she had wandered into what until a few minutes ago had been a full-scale battle. She was lucky. The SAS men had taken control of the church and immediate area. Most of the Scorpia people were dead. The remainder had put down their weapons in surrender. A final explosion had breached the entrance of the church itself. The SAS soldiers were already pouring in, searching for Alex. The bag lady was clearly confused by all this activity. Possibly she was also drunk, but there was a bottle of cider in one of her hands, and she stopped to force the neck between her rotten teeth and drink. She had a repulsive, withered face and grey hair that was long and knotted. She was dressed in a filthy coat tied around her bulging waist with string. Her other hand clutched two dustbin bags close to her, as if they contained all the treasure in the world. One of the soldiers saw her. "Get out of here!" he yelled. "You're in danger!" "All right, love," the bag lady giggled. "What's the matter then? It's like bleeding World War III. But she shuffled off out of harm's way, while the SA men rushed past her, heading for the church. Underneath the wig, the makeup, and the costume, Miss Waterman smiled to herself. It was almost incredible what these stupid SAS soldiers should let her walk away, slipping them in plain daylight. She had a gun hidden under her coat, and she would use it if anyone tried to stop her, but they were so busy rushing into the church they had barely noticed her. One of them called out, "Stop!" She had seen after all. Miss Waterman hurried on, but the soldier hadn't been trying to detain her. He had been trying to warn her. A shadow fell across her face, and she looked up, just in time to see a blazing rectangle fall out of the sky. Julia Waterman opened her mouth to scream, but the second didn't have time to reach her lips. She was crushed, driving into the pavement, flattened like a creature in some hideous cartoon. The SAS man who had shouted could only gaze at the burning wreckage in horror, but slowly he looked up to see where it had come from. There was nothing there. The sky was clear, free from the platform and the moving ropes. The balloon had been blown north, with Alex still clinging in the reading seat. He was limp and exhausted. His legs and the side of his cheek had been burnt. It was as much as he could do simply to hang on. But the air inside the envelope had cooled, and the balloon was coming down. Alex had been lucky that the fabric of the balloon was flame resistant. Of course, he might still be killed. He had no control of the balloon at all, and the wind might choose to steer him into a high voltage wire. He had already crossed the river and could see Trafalgar Square with Nelson Column looming up in front of him. It would be a sick joke to land there and end up getting run over. Alex could only hang on and wait to find what it was going to happen to him. Despite the pain in his arms, he was aware of a sense of inner peace. Somehow, against all the odds, he had come through everything alive. I was dead. This Waterman was probably a prisoner. Her nano shells were no longer a threat. And what about him? The wind had changed. It was carrying him to the west. Yes. There was a green park just 50-odd meters below. He could see people pointing up at him and shouting. Silently urged the balloon on. With a bit of luck, he might make it all the way to Chelsea, to his house where Jack Starby would be waiting. How much further could it be? Did the balloon have the strength to take him there? He hoped so, because that was all he cared about. Now, he just wanted to go home. But everybody, that's the end of the reading here. So bye-bye everyone, and thank you for listening to this.